Hey there, friends. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. It's just a second for you, but it means the world to me. And drop a comment. Where are you listening from today? It was barely 6 a.m. when I pulled into my mom's driveway, in the suburbs of Seattle. The fog was thick, curling around the evergreens like a blanket, and the air smelled like wet pine and asphalt. My truck's headlights cut through the haze, and I left the engine idling, stepping out to stretch my legs. I'm Robert, 52, a freelance accountant who spent years crunching numbers and, honestly, fixing other people's messes. This trip, though, this was different. I'd spent 5 months planning a luxury cruise to Alaska. A week on the water, cabins with ocean views, whale-watching tours, dinners with linen napkins and candlelight. The works. It was my gift to my mom, Ellen, and my younger sister, Claire. A chance to stitch up the frayed edges of our family, especially with Claire, who's always been Mom's golden girl. I paid for it all, every cent from my savings, every vacation day I'd hoarded. I don't splurge often, but this felt right. Like something I could give them that'd mean more than the usual birthday checks or helping with Mom's leaky roof. The front door creaked open, and there was Mom, 78, rolling her suitcase down the path. She had her scarf tied just so, like she was headed to some fancy gala, not a dock. Claire was right behind her, 45, texting furiously on her phone, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. I smiled, popped the trunk, and then I saw him. Derek. Claire's fiancé, 38, dragging a duffel bag like he was moving in. His grin was all teeth, like a car salesman closing a deal. I froze. Mom? What's going on? My voice came out tighter than I meant. Mom didn't even look up, just kept wrestling her suitcase toward the truck. Derek's coming instead. Of you, Robert. He needs this more. I blinked, my breath catching like I'd been punched. Excuse me? She waved a hand like I was making a fuss over nothing. You're always so busy with your numbers, honey. You can go another time. Derek's been stressed with wedding plans. Derek clapped me on the shoulder, his hand heavy. Appreciate you setting this up, man. Seriously, I'm burned out. That grin again, like we were buddies sharing a beer. I turned to Claire, waiting for her to say something, anything. She just shrugged, eyes still on her phone. It's fine, Rob. Don't make it a thing. And Mom, she just kept that tight little smile, the one she's used my whole life when she's already made up her mind. I looked at her, then at Claire, then at Derek, his duffel now slung over his shoulder like he'd already claimed my spot. My spot, my cruise, my money. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This was for us, the three of us. I planned it. I paid for it. She sighed, like I was a kid throwing a tantrum. We're still going, Robert. You said we should relax, enjoy ourselves. Well, Derek needs that right now. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The words were there, sharp, hot, ready to spill, but I swallowed them, my hands clenched, unclenched. I glanced at Claire again, hoping for a flicker of guilt. Nothing. Just her phone screen glowing in the morning fog. I should have walked away right then. Should have left their bags on the lawn and peeled out. But I didn't. I'm Robert. The guy who fixes things. The guy who pays for things. The guy who doesn't make waves. So I loaded their bags into the trunk, slammed it shut harder than I meant to, and got back behind the wheel. Let's go, I said, my voice flat as the pavement. They climbed in, and we pulled out of the driveway, the fog swallowing the house. Behind us. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, and drove toward the dock. The drive to the Seattle dock felt like it lasted forever, even though it was barely 40 minutes. The fog was still thick, smearing the city lights into blurry halos, and the hum of my truck's engine was the only sound keeping me grounded. I'm Robert, 52, the guy who spent a lifetime making sure everyone else is okay. But right then, sitting behind the wheel with my mom, my sister Claire, and her fiancé Derek in the back, I wasn't okay. Not even close. Derek was sprawled across the back seat, already yammering about the cruise. "Man, I saw this YouTube video about Alaska," he said, his voice loud, like he was hosting a podcast. "They've got these whale tours where you can see orcas like right there. You think they'll let me bring a fishing rod?" He laughed, and my mom chuckled along, patting his arm like he was her favorite son. "Make sure you get pictures, Derek, especially at that glacier dinner. I hear they carve the ice right at your table." Claire just scrolled her phone, not even looking up. I caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, her face lit blue by the screen, completely unbothered that she just helped kick me out of my own trip. My trip. The one I'd spent months planning, poring over cruise websites, picking out the best cabins, the best tours, all on my dime. My hands tightened on the wheel, the leather creaking under my grip. I wanted to say something, anything, to make them see how wrong this was. But I didn't. Not yet. My mom leaned forward, her scarf brushing the back of my seat. "We really appreciate you driving, Robert," she said, her voice soft but empty, like she was reading a script. I didn't answer, just kept my eyes on the road, counting the mile markers like they were lifelines. When we got to the dock, the cruise ship loomed like a floating city, all gleaming white and glass, with crew members in crisp uniforms waving, people aboard. I pulled up to the drop-off, popped the trunk and got out to unload. Derek's bag was heavy, stuffed to the brim, and I dropped it on the pavement a little harder than I needed to. He didn't notice, just slung it over his shoulder and grinned. "You're a champ, Rob. I'll send you some pics from the glacier." Mom stretched, adjusting her scarf. "That drive was exhausting," she said, like I'd just put her through a marathon. Claire finally looked up from her phone, gave me a half smile, and said, "Thanks, Rob." Like that was enough. Like that erased the fact they'd swapped me out like a spare tire. I stood there, watching them head toward the terminal, their suitcases rolling behind them. Not one of them looked back. Not Mom, not Claire, not Derek with his stupid grin. They just walked off laughing, like I was the hired help. I got back in the truck, slammed the door, and sat there for a minute. The engine still off. My pulse was hammering in my ears, louder than the seagulls circling overhead. I drove home in a daze, the fog thinning, but my head still clouded. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark, quiet, just like I'd left it. I walked inside, didn't bother turning on the lights, and sank into the old armchair in the living room. It was Mom's old chair, one she'd given me when I moved out years ago, the fabric worn thin from her years of sitting in it, knitting, watching her soaps. I stared at it, then at my laptop on the coffee table. Something snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet click in my head, like a lock turning. I grabbed the laptop, opened the cruise folder, every confirmation email, every reservation code, every detail I'd spent hours perfecting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second, then I started clicking. Cabin, canceled. Whale watching tour, gone. That fancy dinner with the glacier view, done. Spa package for mom, wiped out. Each email that popped up, your cancellation, has been confirmed. Felt like a weight lifting off my chest, like I was breathing real air for the first time all day. I wasn't just canceling a trip. I was taking back something they thought they could just grab from me, like it was theirs to take. My phone started buzzing before I even closed the laptop. Mom. Robert, what's going on? The cruise line says there's no reservation. Claire. Are you serious right now? Fix this. Derek. Dude, this is low. What the hell? I didn't answer. Just let the phone vibrate on the table, each buzz like a tiny tantrum I didn't know an explanation for. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, walked out to the back porch, and sat down in the old wicker chair that creaked under my weight. The Seattle. Night was cool, the air sharp with the smell of rain-soaked cedar. I cracked the beer open, the fizz cutting through the quiet, and just sat there, listening to the wind rustle the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fix anything. Then there was a knock at the door. Not loud, just a soft tap, like someone wasn't sure they should be there. I set the beer down, grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Yeah, I'm that guy, and cracked the door open. It was Tom, my old neighbor, 58, with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a paper bag of homemade cookies in the other. His gray hair was a mess, and he had that same easy smile I remembered from our barbecues years ago. Didn't mean to barge in, he said, holding up the thermos. Just figured you might need a friend who's not yelling at you right now. I opened the door wider, managed a half smile. You heard already? Small town, big mouths, he said, stepping inside. Your mom's probably telling half of Seattle you're the villain by now. I laughed, sharp and short, and it felt good. Real. We sat on the porch, and I told him everything. Tom just listened, nodding, not interrupting, not judging. When I finished, he leaned back, took a sip of coffee, and said, You did the right thing, Rob. They don't get to walk all over you and expect you to smile about it. For the first time that day, I felt seen. Not the accountant, not the fix-it guy, not the backup plan. Just me. Hey friends, before we dive back in, hit that like button if you're rooting for Robert, and drop a comment. Have you ever found a new passion later in life? What was it? Let's share some stories. The days after I canceled that cruise felt strange. Not bad, just quiet. Like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. I'm Robert, 52, the guy who's always been there to fix things. Bills, roofs, family fights. But sitting on my porch that night, with Tom's coffee thermos still warm in my hands, I realized something. I didn't have to fix this. I didn't have to fix them. For once, I could fix me. I opened my laptop the next morning, the cruise cancellation emails still sitting in my inbox like little trophies. The refunds were processing, a chunk of my savings coming back. I didn't want to just shove it in the bank, though. That felt too safe, too much like the old Robert who always played it smart. So I started searching. Not for another family trip, no way. For something just for me. That's how I ended up booking a week at a small farm in Oregon, down near the Willamette Valley. They had this gardening workshop, nothing fancy, just a handful of folks learning to plant, prune, and grow their own food. I've always liked messing around in the dirt, keeping a few tomato plants alive in my backyard, but I'd never taken it seriously. It was just something to do on weekends when I wasn't balancing someone else's books or bailing out. My sister Claire, this time though, it felt different, like a chance to grow something that was mine. The drive to Oregon was long, but I didn't mind. The highway stretched out, flanked by pines and rolling hills, and I kept the windows down, letting the air whip through the truck. When I pulled into the farm, the sun was just dipping low, painting the fields gold. The place smelled like hay and fresh-turned soil, and there was this old barn with a sign that read, "Welcome Growers." I smiled for the first time in days. The workshop was small, maybe 10 of us, led by a woman with dirt under her nails and a laugh that carried across the fields. I learned how to plant lavender, how to coax herbs from seeds, how to tell when. Soil's too wet or too dry. My hands were caked in earth by the end of the first day, and I loved it. Every morning I'd wake up early, grab a coffee from the farm's kitchen, and eat warm apple scones while watching mist curl off the river. I started a journal too, not some deep diary, just notes. Rosemary needs full sun. Don't overwater. Basil. Simple stuff. But it felt good to write something that wasn't a budget or a grocery list for Mom. One afternoon, I was kneeling in the dirt, trying to get a row of carrots right, when I heard a familiar voice. "Rob Mitchell, is that you? Up to your elbows in mud?" I looked up, and there was Tom, my old neighbor from Seattle, standing there in a flannel shirt, holding a pair of pruning shears. Turns out, he taught occasional classes at the farm, sharing his knack for growing things. I laughed, brushed the dirt off my hands, and we sat on a hay bale, catching up like no time had passed. Tom asked about the cruise fiasco, and I told him the whole story. How I'd canceled everything, how my phone was still blowing up with angry texts from Mom and Claire. He didn't flinch, just nodded. "You know," he said, taking a sip from his thermos, "my brother pulled something like that years ago. Took my dad's fishing trip and left me out. I was mad for a while, but then I realized they don't get to decide who you are. You did good, Rob. You drew a line." His words stuck with me like seeds pressed into soil. That night, I sat by the river, the water catching the last of the sunset, and I wrote in my journal again. Not just about plants, but about me. How I'd spent years being the guy who paid for things. Mom's new gutters, Claire's credit card debt, Christmas dinners I hosted because no one else would. How I'd let them make me feel like the backup plan. Writing it down felt like pulling weeds, clearing space for something new. I started taking pictures of the farm, too. Nothing fancy, just my phone, rows of lavender, the barn against the sky, a rusty wheelbarrow filled with zucchini. I posted a few on a gardening forum online, not expecting much, but people responded. "Love the composition," one said. "That lavender shot's frame-worthy," another wrote. I stared at my phone a little stunned. I never thought of myself as someone who made things worth looking at. By the time the week ended, I didn't want to leave. I bought a small clay pot from the farm shop, planted a sprig of thyme in it, and set it on my dashboard for the drive home. Back in Seattle, I rearranged my backyard, ripping out the old patchy grass and starting a proper garden. I ordered seeds online, built raised beds, even sketched out plans for a trellis. It wasn't just about plants. It was about building something that didn't belong to anyone else. Tom texted me a few days later, just a quick, "Keep growing, man." I sent back a picture of my new garden bed, half finished but mine. He replied with a thumbs up and a link to a local gardening group. I joined, started sharing more photos, and people kept saying the same thing. "You've got an eye for this." For the first time in years, I felt like I was more than the guy who fixed things. I was the guy who made things grow. Hey friends, before we jump back in, drop a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up to family who crossed a line? What happened? Share your story And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It keeps these stories coming your way. I'm Robert, 52, and after that week in Oregon, something shifted inside me. The garden I'd started in my backyard wasn't just dirt and seeds. It was proof I could build something for myself. But back in Seattle, my phone was still a minefield. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Claire, even a voicemail from Derek, all spitting the same venom. I'd ruined their cruise, embarrassed them, acted like a child. I didn't reply. Not because I was scared, but because I was done explaining myself to people who never listened. A couple weeks after I got back, I was out back, knee-deep in my garden, when Tom swung by. He'd been checking in since Oregon, usually with a bad joke or a tip about mulching. This time, though, he looked serious, leaning against the fence with his coffee thermos. "Rob," he said, "there's something you need to know. I heard it from my sister who's tight with your mom's book club." I set down my trowel, wiped the dirt off my hands, and braced myself. "What now?" He took a breath like he was choosing his words carefully. "Claire's the one who pushed for Derek to take your spot. She told your mom you were too busy with work, that you wouldn't mind stepping back. But it wasn't just that. She wanted Derek to cozy up to your mom, get her to chip in for their wedding. Big venue, open bar, the whole deal. Claire played it like you'd be fine with it, like you always are." I stood there, the words sinking in like rain into dry soil. Claire. My sister, who'd always been Mom's favorite, who got away with everything while I picked up the pieces. She didn't just let me get pushed out. She orchestrated it, for money, for a damn wedding. I felt my jaw tighten, my hands curling into fists. She lied to Mom. Tom nodded. "Your mom bought it. Claire's good at spinning stories. Always has been." I didn't say anything for a minute, just stared at the lavender I'd planted, its purple spikes swaying in the breeze. All those years, paying for Mom's new water heater, covering Claire's credit card when she overspent, hosting family dinners because no one else would. They didn't just forget me. They used me. And Claire? She'd planned it. A few days later, they came back from Alaska. I knew they were coming. Mom had texted about their flight. I didn't plan to see them, but when I drove by Mom's house to drop off some tools for a neighbor, there they were, piling out of a taxi. Mom, her scarf still knotted like she was auditioning for a travel ad. Claire, glued to her phone. Derek, red-faced, yanking bags from the trunk like they'd personally offended him. Mom spotted me first, her eyes narrowing as she marched across the lawn. "Robert Mitchell, you have no idea what you put us through," she snapped, not even waiting to reach me. "We got to the cruise desk, and they said there was no reservation. None. We had to scramble for a cheap hotel, no view, no nothing. People stared at us like we were scam artists." I leaned against my truck, arms crossed. "You got turned away because I canceled it, Mom. Because you swapped me out like I was nobody." Derek stormed over, dropping a bag on the grass. "You could have let it go, man. We were already there. You didn't have to nuke the whole trip." I laughed, short and sharp. "Let it go? You took my spot, Derek. My money, my plan, my time, and you didn't even blink." Mom threw her hands up. "Don't be dramatic, Robert. We thought you'd understand. Derek's part of the family now." I took a step forward, my voice low, but steady. "No, Mom. You don't get to rewrite this. I know what Claire did. She lied to you, said I was too busy, also Derek could suck up for wedding cash. And you went along with it." Claire's head snapped up from her phone, her face pale. "That's not true," she stammered. But her eyes gave her away. "It is," I said, looking right at her. "You've been playing this game your whole life. I paid for your mistakes, Claire. Your debts. Your messes. I hosted Christmases, fixed Mom's house, and what do I get? Pushed aside like I'm the hired help. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Derek just stood there, arms crossed, looking like he wanted to punch something but didn't have the guts. Claire started to speak, but I cut her off. I'm done being your safety net. All of you. If you want me in your life, you start treating me like I matter. No more lies, no more games. I didn't wait for a response. I got in my truck, the door slamming shut, and drove off. The rearview mirror showed them standing there, silent, bags scattered on the lawn. For once, they didn't get the last word. A week later, I called Mom. Not to apologize, but to be clear. I didn't cancel that trip to hurt you, I told her, my voice calm. I did it because I'm done being invisible. If you want to talk, it's got to be real. No guilt trips, no excuses. She was quiet for a long time, her breath shaky on the other end. Okay, Robert, she finally said, soft, almost broken. I hear you. I hung up, set the phone down, and walked out to my garden. The lavender was thriving, the air thick with its scent. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt free. Hey, friends, we're at the end of this journey. But before we wrap up, hit that like button if Robert's story hit home for you. And drop a comment. What would you have done in his shoes? Share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I'm Robert 52, and the weeks after that showdown with my family felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer, like the fog that blankets Seattle had finally lifted. My backyard garden was coming along, rows of lavender, basil, and tomatoes I'd planted with my own hands, not for anyone else. Every time I dug into the soil, it was like I was planting a piece of myself, something no one could take away. 6 months passed, and I was standing in a community garden I'd helped build in my neighborhood. It started small, just a few raised beds I set up with some folks from that online gardening group. But it grew. Neighbors pitched in, kids planted sunflowers, and we even got a local market to sell our extra zucchini and herbs. I'd show up every Saturday, dirt under my nails, trading tips with people who didn't expect me to fix their lives. They just wanted to talk about compost or how to keep slugs away. It was simple. It was mine. One morning, I was hauling a bag of mulch when a volunteer handed me a letter. It was from the community center, thanking me for a donation I'd made a few months back. See, when I canceled that cruise, I didn't just pocket the refund. I'd taken a chunk of it and quietly funded a corner of this garden, a little patch we called Peace Plot. It's where people could sit, think, or plant something in memory of someone they'd lost, even if that loss was just a piece of themselves. The letter said that Patch had become a favorite spot, with a bench and a sign that read, Peace Plot, thanks to Robert M. I stood there, reading it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not loud, not showy, just real. I hadn't told anyone about the donation, not even Tom. But when I showed him the letter, he just grinned, clapped me on the shoulder. You're a good man, Rob. Most people would have kept that money or spent it on themselves. You made something that lasts. Tom and I had been meeting up regularly since Oregon. Nothing formal, just coffee at the diner down the street or a walk through the market, arguing over whether heirloom tomatoes were worth the fuss. He was 58, a guy who'd seen his own share of family drama, and he never pushed me to talk about mine. But when I did, he listened. Really listened. Not like my mom, who'd always turn it back to her, or Claire, who'd only hear what she wanted. Tom saw me for me. Not the guy who paid for things or fixed things. Just Rob, the guy who liked dirt and coffee and a good laugh. My family, though, they were another story. Mom called a few times, her voice softer than before, leaving voicemails about wanting to talk things out. "We miss you, Robert," she'd say, pausing like she hoped I'd call back right then. I didn't. Not out of anger, but because I wasn't ready to step back into their orbit. Claire never reached out, and I wasn't surprised. Derek sent one text, a half-hearted "sorry, man," but I didn't reply. I didn't block him, but I didn't owe him a response either. One evening I called Mom, not to make peace, but to be clear. "I'm not shutting you out," I told her, standing in my garden with the phone pressed to my ear. "But things have to change. I'm not your fix-it guy anymore. If you want me in your life, you've got to see me as more than that." She was quiet for a long moment, her breath uneven. "I didn't realize how much we leaned on you," she said finally, her voice small. "I'm sorry, Robert." It was the first real apology I'd ever heard from her. I didn't say much, just, "Okay, Mom, let's start there." We hung up, and I sat on the bench in my garden, the air cool and thick with the scent of thyme. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt steady. I started planning my next trip, a solo one to Vermont, to learn about organic gardening. No family, no expectations, just me and a notebook full of ideas for my next planting season. I'd been taking more photos, too. My garden, the community plot, even the way the morning light hit the Puget Sound. I sent a few to a local market, and they bought one to hang in their cafe. Not big money, but it felt like a seed taking root. Most weekends, Tom and I would walk through the neighborhood, sometimes grabbing pancakes at the diner, sometimes just sitting by the water, watching ferries cut through the Sound. We'd talk about dumb stuff, why his roses always outdid mine, whether the Seahawks had a shot this year. It wasn't deep, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying anyone else's weight. Here's the thing I've learned, friends. You can spend your whole life building things for other people, trips, homes, dreams, and still end up feeling like you're on the outside looking in. But the moment you start building for yourself, even if it's just a garden or a quiet moment alone, you realize something. Your worth isn't in what you give others. It's in what you choose to keep for yourself. The things you grow, the boundaries you set, the life you decide is yours. That's what makes you whole. So, what do you think? Was I right to cancel that cruise? Would you have done the same, or would you have let it slide? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. Thanks for listening, friends.